Today, I'm going to be talking about traction tires, and more specifically, I'm going to be comparing two different products I used to create traction tires on a couple of different locomotives. As many of you know, a lot of older models, such as this Lionel GP30, this Tyco 460, and this Bachmann U-boat, all use traction tires to get enough traction to pull a train. As you can see on this one, I've got this more yellowish looking traction tire. On the 460, there's currently no traction tire. And then on the Bachmann unit, there's a much clearer and a little more odd-looking traction tire. To start, I want to talk about the traction tires I've been using on a lot of my diesels and just in general on a lot of my locomotives for a while now, which happen to be these, which are just little dental bands, and they actually work really well. They're fairly cheap, and you can get quite a lot of them. I think it's a 100 pack for about $4 or something like that, and they seem to work really well. On diesels with some pretty large tire gaps and pretty thick tire gaps, these work wonders. They fill the gap just about perfectly, and they fit just about perfectly on the wheels. It works really well on Bachmann units, Lionel units, also some Tyco models, not Mantuas though, and some other models they don't work on, but on most diesels they seem to work just fine. And most of the time they're pretty simple to put on, but there can be some hiccups. I'll just show you with this one random Tyco Power Torque wheel set I have. You just kind of set the band on like this, and then you just kind of pull it around like that, and then it slides on, and as you can see, the band is on there. With these, I have definitely run into some issues before. As you can see, it's not seated correctly, so usually what I'll do is I'll run my finger just around like that, and then that'll get the traction tire itself seated correctly. Another issue I've run into is sometimes these traction tires like to warp and end up being flipped up over themselves, which is a really big issue when trying to make a train run smoothly. So often I'll have to take it on and off and just restart putting it on over and over and over again, much less smoothly than this, to actually make the traction tire fit onto the wheel properly. And as I've mentioned, traction tires like these don't work perfectly for every single model. A lot of the Mantua models, the gap for their traction tire is too small and these just simply don't fit. On a model like this Tyco 460, you would have to take off the side rod to actually be able to wrap a traction tire around there, and you'd probably have to take off the shell as well. And then on other models that don't already have traction tires, if you wanted to add a traction tire, it would be way too bulky, and it would probably be larger than the flange of the model itself, so they were really useless for being put on newer models without traction tires. So to counteract that, I recently bought a new-ish product. It's been around for a while. It's called Bullfrog Snot, and essentially it is a liquid traction tire. And yeah, the name is a little bit ridiculous. So essentially how this works, I'll show you the instruction sheet it comes with in just a second, is that you take a toothpick like this, you kind of dab it in there, and while the locomotive's wheels are spinning away from the toothpick at a reasonable speed, about a yard speed is what it says, you just kind of apply it, then you have to smooth it out and let it run until the traction tire itself dries out, and then you let it sit overnight. So onto the instruction sheet, which is actually the packaging around the bottle itself. And the front of this is actually kind of funny. There's a lot of really humorous quotes and just lines on here that I really like. Some of these are just pretty fun to read and look at. I got a good laugh at some of them. But on the backside, it shows you just about how to do everything. You want to give it power, apply a reasonable amount, rotate the wheels away from the Q-tip, keep them spinning, make it look sort of like that. And when the wheel looks like that, you stop letting them spin, and then you let it sit overnight. I think it is worth noting that this product was initially developed for N-scale models, and I think some of the times it mentions on here are a little bit off. It says that you should let the wheels spin for about 5 to 10 minutes. I found with engines that have pretty big traction tire voids, such as this Tyco 460, you'll have to let it spin for quite a while, sometimes for several hours is what I've had to do. But on engines where you're just trying to put on a new traction tire to a wheel that doesn't have one, it can take about 5 to 10 minutes or so. It's a little bit trickier to master, and I still have not mastered that yet, so I'm not going to be showing you how to do that. But I will show you how to fill the void on a traction tire, specifically on this 460. In addition, I will also just kind of show you the traction tires that are already on this unit, which I've used as a test piece. So on here we have this one wheel, which I filled the traction tire gap with some of this liquid traction tire stuff. And I didn't do the greatest job. It's a little bit too small, so it doesn't grip perfectly. I may have to just add a little bit more on top of that in the near future, but it seems to work just fine. And then on the other wheel is the one I tried experimenting with the traction tire on a wheel set that was not originally made for a traction tire. And just by making a really thin layer, it's worked pretty well. It's not the smoothest thing in the world, so I still need to do some practice, but it does seem to work really well. So this one might need a little bit more trial and error, but I think I like the results I've seen so far. I've also tried this on an N scale 440, and that also worked pretty well. So to test this out, I've got the unit set up just in a cradle like this. So all you're really going to need to do is turn up the power. It'll have to be, I think about there is the appropriate speed to have it at, and you want to have it going this way. A lot of people may have it opposite. I'm left-handed, so I would be doing it this way. But if I was doing it with my right hand, I would flip the direction and have it go this way. You want to have the wheel itself moving away from the toothpick, not towards it. I've also found that on a lot of these models, you have to apply a little bit more than what the image shows. It says apply sparingly, but a lot of times I have to reapply it just to get a good even layer on here, because sometimes just a little bit on the toothpick itself is not enough. So with all that out of the way, I guess it's time to try and put some of this stuff onto this one wheel of the 460. I just had to move the camera and I reapplied a little bit more off camera. It was just a little bit below the groove of the traction tire, so I added more, and now it looks to be perfectly in line and even. So now I've just got to let this run around probably for a couple of hours, and then I'll come back in a few days once this is fully cured. So it's now a few days later and the traction tire has completely dried. It actually did not take as long as I was expecting it to. It really only took about an hour and a half of the wheels running for them to be dry enough. I still let the thing run for about another hour and a half after that for a total of 3 hours or so, just to make absolutely certain that it was dry enough, but it really didn't take as long as it had on some previous models that I've applied this to. Now, it may be hard to see, but I've got the camera zoomed in to show you the full result. As you can see, it actually does look very smooth. I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but some of it did get on this little ledge of the wheel right here. I'm not entirely concerned by that, just simply because that's lower than the tire itself dried. So it may not look the best, but it should provide a little extra traction just in case. And overall, I don't think it's going to impact how smoothly this thing runs. But taking a look at the tire, it actually looks pretty smooth all the way around. There's a little bit of flashing on the edge of the flange that I need to clean off. But other than that, I think this went on very smoothly. And in theory, this traction tire should work very well. So why don't we put this on my little layout? We'll see how this thing runs without a train. Then we'll put a train probably about 5, 7 cars behind it and see how it fares. So the 460 is all set up on the track. For the record, I do not really have any comparison of how this engine ran without the traction tire on it. I should have done that, but I'll just end up showing you the results here. And in this instance, we just want to see how smoothly this thing runs with the tire and make sure it doesn't wobble or do anything wild like that. So I'll turn up the power just a little bit. And so far that seems pretty smooth. Just because why not? I'll bring it backwards as well. And it seems like that traction tire went on pretty smooth. So I've got a train set up for this 460 to pull, consisting of 2 boxcars, 1 Bachmann, 1 Athearn Blue Box, both of them 50-foot boxcars. And then we also have a train of 5 Globe model passenger cars, which I've upgraded. They've got metal wheels and everything, and they're properly weighted. I'm not going to need this engine to pull anything more than this train, really, in the entire time I'm going to end up owning this thing. And I wanted to get these Globe model passenger cars out again. So yeah, this might be a bit much for this 460, and it's not the most realistic train, but it should be a good test for this locomotive. So we'll give it some power, and we'll see if it can actually pull this. And it seemed to pull all that without any issues or slipping or anything, which is pretty impressive. So now that I have used this Bullfrog Snot on both several other engines and this 460, it's time to ask the question, is this actually better and more worth it than these little rubber traction tire dental bands that I've been using before? And I think the answer is 99% of the time, yes. This stuff seems to be a lot easier and more trouble-free to install. I believe it will probably last a lot longer, seeing the results I've had with some of these bands and the way that these traction tires seem to look. They seem to pull about the same amount of weight, and it also seems like these traction tires are a lot more flexible and can be used in locomotives with much different sizes of wheels, and it can also be used to put traction tires on wheels that either have really thin flanges or that need to have a traction tire where there was originally not one in the first place. But for me, I think when I'm working on diesels like this, in my videos and whatnot, I'm still going to keep using these. It's going to make the process a lot quicker. I really don't want to wait 3 hours or so just to get a good traction tire on one of these. It'll definitely last longer, but for the purposes of me filming these videos for you to see, I'm going to keep using these. I want it to be done fairly quickly, and if I have to flip a model that I just worked on over to run it for a while to put a new traction tire on, it's going to spoil the surprise of whether or not the thing will actually run. So I'll definitely use these temporarily, and then permanently, I think I'll use this. But there's still definitely a use case for these little bands for me specifically, even though I'm pretty sure 99% of other modelers won't have this exact use case. In the end though, I think there's definitely a case to be made for both products. These dental bands work really well if you just need a quick solution for repairing a traction tire on a generic diesel or something like that. They definitely won't last the longest, but if you need a traction tire quickly and cheaply, it's definitely the way to go. If you need a traction tire that'll last longer and will look a little bit better, I think the Bullfrog Snot, even though it's more expensive, is definitely the way to go, even though it does take a considerable amount of time to put on a model. So in my case, I'll keep using these for really quick solutions whenever I possibly can, but for all my models that I'm keeping long term and I want to have retain their traction tires in the long term, I think I'm going to continue using this Bullfrog Snot because it is a really good product.